Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria of course. I'm in a different location to what you guys would probably be used to. I'm actually sitting in Parkland, what used to be part of the estate of Petworth House in West Sussex, and it's huge, and it's one of the most beautiful parks that I know. Actually, I absolutely adore it. I just love the shape of the landscape here. Obviously you can only see what's behind me, which is a bunch of trees, but there's beautiful hills, beautiful views and vistas around here. So this is a slightly different video to what I normally shoot, and I suppose it's a bit of Matt Easton philosophy, if we can call it that. But it relates to history, and it relates to a lot of the things that come up in my channel, because obviously I'm talking about historical periods and conflict, okay? And I fully understand, you know, sometimes it's very easy to detach ourselves from, you know, the fact that we think swords are cool, we think guns are cool, we think, you know, whatever, wargaming's cool, and it's easy to detach ourselves from the fact that, you know, these periods of conflict were horrific for lots of the people involved in them. But that's not specifically what I want to talk about. What I really want to talk about is the fact that, and I suppose this would be the headline or the title of this video, would be that the sins of the father or mother are not the sins of the son or daughter. And I think that this is something which by the year 2018 we should have started to realise, and I know that many people do realise this, but it's still inherited guilt and inherited grudges and prejudice and are still so prevalent in the modern world, in developed and developing countries, and dictates so much of politics and modern decision making, modern policy making. And unfortunately, I see huge amounts of it on the internet. So the reason I'm talking about this is it stemmed from the fact that a friend of mine posted a picture related to Flashman from the book series by MacDonald Fraser, and some of you will be familiar with the Flashman books. Now, the first thing to say about the Flashman books is clearly they're a story about someone who's essentially a very undesirable person, but they are interesting and amusing stories, and they're very, very well historically researched. In some cases they've got more historical detail than actual history books about those periods, but the point is that it's a sort of meme basically where Flashman is being unapologetic for the British Empire. Well, so this is obviously a subject, I won't say close to my heart, but that clearly relates to me, because so many of the videos I make are set during the British Imperial period. Now, it's the idea that a British person living in 2018 should feel guilt or be apologetic for the actions of the British Empire. Okay, now, first of all, absolutely. So I'm not an apologist. Okay, so absolutely bad things that happened in history were bad things. Okay, that's the first thing to sort of get out of the way. You have to absolutely accept that, you know, whether it's something that happened during the Second World War or the Balkans conflict of the 1990s, or whether it's something that happened during the Second Anglo-Boer War in 1900, let's say, then a bad thing is a bad thing. Okay, and now morality, I won't go into the parameters of morality, but there are generally accepted rights and wrongs amongst most civilized cultures. Obviously there are some borderline things where people would argue over justified war and that kind of stuff, but the fact is that yes, absolutely, things which were done in the past which were wrong are wrong. But let's bring this into a modern context. Say, for example, the British government decided to go to war in Afghanistan in the 2000s for what I consider to be the wrong reasons. Is it my guilt? Am I guilty for that? I would say no. my only parts that I can play in modern British government, unless I actually become a politician myself, which I have no intentions of doing, is to either vote or lobby or protest, or these kinds of things. Okay, so actually my ability to govern government, my ability to change government decisions about things like going to war are minimal. Okay, I am I would say a citizen, but in Britain I would say we're more subjects than citizens, and I don't have the ability, apart from through my YouTube channel or writing books or campaigning or protesting, I don't have the ability really to have any real impact on government policy making, and certainly on when we come to the large things like this. Now, when we go back into history, when we're talking about the 19th century, well, clearly that's true. I don't have, Gladstone was seen, I think broadly seen as most people, as a warmonger and an imperialist, definitely. I don't have any ability to control what Gladstone did. Even my ancestors, who were alive at the time, didn't really have the ability to govern, to dictate what the British government did at that time. They may have been personally supportive of it. For all I know, some of, or maybe all of my ancestors living in Britain in, let's say, 1880 or 1882 were very supportive of British imperial policy in the Sudan and Egypt and India and Afghanistan and other places, South Africa. But even if they were, they made those decisions, they made those choices based on the information available to them and who they were. Yes, I'm genetically a product of them, but I'm not guilty for their sins. In the same way that I would not personally hold any of my Austrian or German friends responsible or guilty for things that were done during the Second World War or the First World War, or do French people blame modern Germans for the Franco-Prussian War? I don't think so. But there are grudges held, and I think that's where a lot of problems in modern politics and just personal relations lie, is that grudges are held about decisions which were made by other people a long time ago. We only need to look at Greece and Turkey, or things in Armenia, or all over the Middle East, or parts of Africa, large parts of Asia as well, where huge grudges are still held about things which happened 50, 100, 150, sometimes 500 years ago. And I think at some point, I understand grudges. Grudges are natural, okay? Grudges are born out of experience. In nature, if there's a certain type of animal which predates you, then you become prejudiced against that animal, don't you? Most of us would be not kind of feeling friendly towards lions if we were wandering around the savannah, and that's natural. But at the same time, we're all humans. We're not different species, and it's ridiculous how grudges are held based on previous political decisions and historical decisions, which really, although the ramifications and the ripples of those come down through history to us, and we live under those ramifications and from the effects of those, and we feel the effects of those, and sometimes we could be marginalised or we could live at disadvantage as a result of those things. We can't hold people today who played no part in those actions. We can't hold them guilty for those decisions that were made by people generations ago. It's ridiculous. So I could waffle on about this probably for hours, but I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts about this. And I think next time, my famous video where I talked about French prowess and how a lot of jokes are made about French military prowess based purely on the Second World War, maybe Vietnam. But actually, France has a glorious and long military history. Well, it's sort of related to that. At some point, you have to look at the bigger picture, and you have to, I think next time, I would urge you, next time you're making a judgment about a nation or a person based on things which previous people, previous generations, previous politicians and governments have done, remember that your government today is making decisions that you don't agree with. Well, if we're talking about someone else's government 100 years ago, well, that becomes like, 10 or 100 times more true. So next time you're making assumptions or kind of prejudiced kind of views or statements about a nationality or a people or a person, question, are they actually responsible for those things which I'm accusing them of? Is that nation, does that nation do me any harm now? Should I be anti whatever that country is because 100 years ago we had a war, or like my ancestors had a war with them, not even we, not me. Anyway, it's something to think about. And I often feel like we could all, I'm not even talking about grand scale politics and sort of nation and empire building. I'm talking about individuals. We could all get on a lot better and be a lot more constructive in our interactions if we carried less baggage, and we have enough baggage as individuals to carry. Let's not carry previous generations' baggage as well. Something to think about. There we go. I don't ever think that I glorify the acts of empire, but I'm also a realist, and I know that if the British Empire hadn't risen to be the prominent empire of the 19th century, then the French Empire would have done, and if the French Empire hadn't have done, then the Spanish Empire or the Dutch Empire or whichever. It's unfortunately the way that nations work. It's not the way that individuals always work, but it's the way that governments work. They try to absorb and conquer those around them. That's just the way that human civilization works. Anyway, folks, I'm going to stop there, and I'll see you for the next video. Cheers. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.